Welcome to another episode of Foresight TV. I am talking to Nancy Harhut. Harhut, did I blow that? I probably butchered that, right?
Harhut, you're good.
Okay, good. And she has written a book about using behavioral science in marketing and just tapping into how people's brains work and how they think about that. We're going to be talking about what that means to senior living operators. She was a featured speaker at the Smash conference in Las Vegas in August, and which is where I met her. And I've been digging into her book, and there's so many insights that are coming out of the book that I'm really, really excited to do that. But first, this.
Hey guys, Steve Moran here.
First off, before we get started, Nancy, I've got to do a little thanks to our sponsor, KARE with a K. They are the single best place to go if you have unfilled shifts. You reach out to them. It's app-based. They will save you a ton of money. They will give you great people. A lot of you are already using KARE, which is terrific. And if you're not using KARE and you're struggling to fill those empty shifts, they are the people to talk to. They will give you amazing service. They really care about the industry. This is all they do is make staffing better for senior living communities. And when you use KARE, it means that your residents are better taken care of and they love you better and more people move in. So sort of behavioral science here, that when you make people happy, they say good things about you and they give you a full building. So you should be talking to KARE if you're not full and you're struggling with staff. If you're not struggling with staff and you're not full, then there are other things you need to do, and we'd love to talk about that as well. Nancy, welcome. I am so excited to have this conversation with you. You first talked at Smash, and let's start with Davy, having you talk a little bit about who you are and your background, and then we'll sort of dig into the meat of what you do.
Sure. Thanks so much, Steve. Happy to be here. I appreciate your inviting me on the show. And so I co-founded an agency called HBT Marketing, and what we do is we blend marketing best practices with behavioral science in order to increase the likelihood that people do what our clients want them to do. And when I say behavioral science, I mean very simply the study of how people behave, or more specifically, of why they do what they do. And behavioral scientists have found that very often people rely on hardwired behaviors. We think that they make these well thought out decisions, but really they use these decision defaults. And if marketers know that, we can get out ahead of it and we can kind of prompt them or nudge them to do what we want them to do. And so that's what the agency does. And about a year and a half ago, I wrote a book called Using Behavioral Science in Marketing that takes everything I've learned about nudging or prompting these instinctive behaviors, and it reveals it to anyone who wants some easy ways to increase engagement and response.
Terrific. So I'm going to actually, my guess is that you, after being at Smash, you probably knew a lot more about senior living. Are you working with any senior living clients? Maybe I should start by asking that. So, or was that sort of your first exposure by fire to senior living?
So I've spoken at Smash a couple of times. I don't have any senior living clients at the moment, although my brother-in-law actually is involved in the business, and I've done some consulting for him and his business. So not a complete stranger to it, but also can't really point to a roster of clients either.
Okay, great. So let's just talk about when you think about senior living in the context of the behavioral science. What would you do? What are the areas that we should be focusing on?
Well, I think one of the first things we have to keep in mind is that people don't make decisions the way we maybe think that they do. We think that people make these well thought out, well considered decisions, and it certainly would make sense. I mean, they should. This is a major decision. But the truth of the matter is there is a lot more that happens in the decision-making process than we're aware of. A lot of times people are relying on these automatic, instinctive, hardwired behaviors. And this comes into play, all along the way. It could be, something that prompts you to open an email or not, to visit a community or not, to schedule, a phone call, to watch a webinar, all the way up to actually making the buying decision. And what we need to do is we need to factor in this idea that there are more than just rational reasons for people to make decisions. As a matter of fact, very often people make decisions for emotional reasons, and then they justify those decisions with rational reasons. So we need to keep in mind that it's a very complex journey when people are making decisions, and it would be very easy to imagine someone sitting there with a sheet of lined paper doing their pros and cons, or figuring out the dollars, and certainly all of that happens. I mean, you can't buy something if you don't have the money, but there are other factors at play. There are other things that make people decide, to try to buy, to listen, to trust. And those are the things that we need to work into our marketing materials and into our sales conversations.
Okay, so let's I'm going to be the client, you're going to be my marketing agency for a few minutes, and let's actually play with this. I am just crazy excited about this. I want to start by saying that. So I've got this senior living community, and I've actually got one in my head. I'm not going to tell you anymore. I'm not going to go into too much detail. I don't want to reveal it. But there's this community that's got 3 levels of care. So it's got independent living, it's got assisted living, and it's got memory care. And it's about 2 years old, and it's only about 60% occupied. And they are struggling to get to break even. And how do I'm the client, I'm desperate, I need you to keep me from hemorrhaging money. Where do we start?
Okay. Well, I think, one of the places we want to start is with our messaging, right? Because I'm sure if you're in business and you're only 60% full, you've got advertising and marketing efforts underway, right? So the question is, what messages are you putting out in the marketplace, and how might we optimize those messages? You're probably saying, hey, look, we're here. You're probably saying we have room, come for a visit. You're probably doing all the basic blocking and tackling, and that's good. But what we want to do now is we want to look at how can we infuse some behavioral science into the messaging. So I mentioned earlier that people make decisions for emotional reasons, and then they justify them later with rational reasons. So that means we want a balance of emotional and rational. And you probably have the rational stuff nailed down, but let's maybe introduce some emotion, and let's think about kind of the two key emotions. There's the emotion of the prospective resident, and then there's the emotion swirling around the current caregiver. And what those people are feeling could be very different. The potential resident might be feeling, the sense of loss, giving up their home or their possessions. The adult child who's a caregiver might be feeling guilt, or just be, agonizing over whether or not this is the right decision. So, so touching on some of those emotions, acknowledging them, trying to alleviate fears or concerns can be a really good thing. But just letting people know that they're heard, you may be wondering if this is the right time. And it's like, yes, instead of just saying, do this right now, now's the time, sign up, become a resident, you're just backing off a little bit and saying, you may be struggling with, when is the right time? You may be thinking, well, this is a decision I can put off to later. So that's one thing, kind of putting some emotion in there. Another thing, we can talk about is this idea of loss aversion. And a lot of times marketers are always erring on the side of positivity, right? We double down on the positives, all the benefits, the gains, the advantages, all the wonderful things that will happen if you join our community, if you reply to my email, if you come and take a tour, right? Like it's all about the advantages and the benefits. And, we're in marketing, we know that benefits work, but behavioral scientists have found that people are actually twice as motivated to avoid the pain of loss as they are to achieve the pleasure of gain. And so let's just stop and think about that for a moment, right? Because in marketing, we're all about the pleasure of gain, right? That's what we talk about. There are all these wonderful things that will happen. You're going to love it here. This is going to be great. It's, going to solve all your problems. And that's a great message. There's nothing wrong with that. But people are twice as motivated to avoid pain as they are to achieve pleasure. So what we want to do is we want to introduce a little bit of loss aversion into our marketing messages. we maybe want to talk about the pain someone may find themselves in if they don't do what we're suggesting they do, or talk about the pain they're going to avoid if they do, in fact, take the action we want them to take. So it's not like we want to go, wholesale walk away from the benefits. No, we want to keep the benefits there, but introducing a little bit of loss aversion. Instead of saying take advantage of, maybe we want to say don't miss out on. Instead of saying, the rates are low today, maybe we want to say the rates are going up tomorrow. Just a little bit of loss aversion. So I don't want to have to pay more, so maybe I should get in on the the introductory rate, the pre-construction special rate, or maybe we say, hey, look, there's only one corner unit left, and it's like, ooh, I would like a corner unit, maybe I better act now, or I'm going to miss out on that. So there are different ways that we can thread some behavioral science through the messaging in order to increase the likelihood that people engage and that they respond.
So a couple things that I'm really fascinated by. So I would tell you that the one area where I see senior living operators, marketing, salespeople use a lot is we've got this special running. I have a shirt tail relative who was living in a senior living community where it just got worse and worse, and he was thinking about making a move, and he found one that he really liked. They clearly had been working at poaching people, knowing that they were unhappy, and they came to him and they said, look, if you'll sign an agreement by the December 31st, we'll give you your 4th month free. And it was compelling for him, and he signed it, and he's now living in this new building, and they've lost the money. And so that kind of loss aversion, I think, is really, really, is used pretty effectively in senior living. The thing I guess I'm sort of more intrigued by, and I'd love to hear your thoughts about, is that I've noticed over the last, week or 10 days, maybe 2 or 3 weeks on Instagram, as I'm scrolling through reels, there have been a series of things that said, if you're 40 years old and your parents live out of town and you're maybe only going to see them 50 times before they die, and you better make maximum use of that. And they're not really selling anything, but the point is that your time with your parents is really limited. And of course, I'm on the older, I'll die someday side of things, and so I'm sort of looking, I hope my kids are watching that and thinking about me. But I'm wondering, do you think, if you want to fall in love again, you should move in our community rather than dying alone at home? Is that too crass?
Well, I think what you're talking about, Steve, is something very interesting. You're talking about something that behavioral scientists refer to as framing. And it's this idea that, the words that we choose influence not only how people understand our message, but how they respond to it. And if you frame something a certain way, you can get them to see things differently. So, it's the classic, this glass is half empty, this glass is half full, right? That's framing. If I tell you it's half empty, you look at it, it looks half empty.
Yep.
So, the typical message about, why maybe you should join a community, may be very different. And what they're trying to do is they're trying to get you to think of it in a different way, to see things differently. It's like, you know what, we're talking about, maybe another 50 visits before that opportunity is gone. I hadn't really thought about it that way. So I think from that perspective, it's a very effective message because it gets you to think about it differently. You might be thinking, mom and dad are fine where they are, or, I'll be able to get out to see them, on the holiday, or we don't, we'll cross that bridge when we come to it. They're fine in their home. But then you start to, you get people to think about it differently. And it's like, wow, okay. And then, you're saying, hey, fall in love again. And I don't know, you probably have to be, you probably have to read your market. And that message may play better in some markets than others based on geography, maybe based on the affiliation of the community, but there's something to be said for, it's a new chapter. And what do you want to do with the next chapter, which may in fact be the final chapter? Maybe you do want to fall in love again. Maybe you want to hang out with people who just really enjoy what you enjoy doing, whether that's playing mahjong or playing bridge, or but it's the idea of reframing a decision someone has to make, or reframing your your marketing message, your value proposition makes a lot of sense, because ultimately you need to shake people up. You need to get them to think about things differently. Because if their initial response is, no, 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 that's not for me, or that's for me, but later down the road, or, oh no, I would never do that to mom or dad. We need to kind of get them to see things differently. And by reframing the message, by getting them to look at it in a different way, in a way that they hadn't before, in a way that they're not used to hearing, that can be incredibly effective.
So I really love this, and I was sort of hoping that somebody might weigh in and say, oh yeah, we've done that, or that's a good idea, because I just think that it's a fast, and I don't know that if I've looked at, on the money side, I've seen it, but in terms of sort of this is the lifestyle that you could be missing out on, or the kind of life you could be missing out on. I don't think I've ever seen a senior living community really take that. So one of the things that I hear, I'll give you, I have a friend of mine who is sort of adjacent to the industry, and his folks are getting older. And so he started looking at senior living, and he did some investigation. And one morning, I woke up to a text message from him saying, searching for senior living sucks, because it was confusing and people felt weren't helpful. Do you have thoughts about how we make it not suck?
Sure. I think it is likely one of the largest, if not the largest, decision you're going to make, right? I mean,
That's right. Yeah.
it's huge, right? Financially, socially, I mean, it's a huge decision, and so just built into that, there's a lot, and so anything we can do to make things easier. And how do we make things easier? Well, one way is by being a little bit more empathetic. I talked a little bit about emotion earlier, but just being empathetic, acknowledging what somebody is feeling, and then going beyond that and thinking about, all right, well, what is the process like for them, and how can we make it easier? How can we remove some friction? How can we get them the information they need, in a way that's usable, that doesn't require them to jump through hoops to get it? I know pricing is often considered a big issue in the senior residence business, because it's like, people want to know, what does it cost? And of course, it's not necessarily as cut and dry as saying, well, it's like if I ask you what's a gallon of milk cost, or a gallon of gas, you can pretty much answer that easily. But it's a little bit more complicated. But yet people have such a hard time, trying to figure out, like, can I even afford this? So maybe making it easier for people to just get answers to the questions that they have. I think sometimes in marketing, we love the products and services that we represent. And so we want to tell people what we want to tell them about them, because we love this product, we love this community, we want to tell you everything we want you to know about the community. But sometimes there are other questions people have, and we are better served thinking about what they want to know and answering those questions. Think about what our prospective customers and clients want to know, and focusing on getting them that information in an easily obtainable, easy to understand way. And then I think that's another thing. Anytime you enter into a contractual arrangement, contracts can be filled with, words and phrases and language that people aren't familiar with, right? Anything that we can do to make things easier to understand, anything that we can do to make people, draw comparisons in a way that they'll recognize and say, oh, okay, I get it. Now that makes sense to me. A lot of it is just, it is going to be difficult. Some of that we can't remove. It's just going to be it's a big investment. It's a big decision. But anything we can do to make it easier along the way, by removing friction, by giving people answers to the questions that they have, by giving them the information that they really want, and helping them to make comparisons. And then also, there are a lot of different options, and helping guide people through their options. People love choices. But Steve, the problem with choices, if you give people too many, they're loving all the choices, but then analysis paralysis sets in. So we're better off guiding people, and kind of bucketing things, saying, okay, well, the first decision you want to make is, are you looking for, this kind of situation or this? All right, now we know that. Now, all right, you've chosen this. Now under this, now you have three choices here. Which of these makes sense? Okay, now you've made that. All right, now let's move on to, so, taking somebody's hand, metaphorically, and leading them down the the purchase continuum, the decision journey, so that it makes it easier for them. It's like somebody on the inside is helping me navigate this. And if you're your friend, he's he knows you, so he's like he's got his guy on the inside. But if all of us could try to be that friend on the inside to any prospective resident or resident's family, how incredible would that be? If we just made it our business to market in that way, to provide information that way, as if we were, kind of helping, a friend or a family member, that would be so awesome, right?
It would be amazing. So I'm going to actually kind of back up. So we've got that. I'm still back on my 60% full building. So I decide that I've got this. I look at my CRM and I've got 500 names in there of people, and I've reached out and I've tried to get them, and I don't really know what happened. And I think, well, maybe I've got some, as one friend company leaders calls them, green bananas in there that are getting ripe that I should tap into. Do you have any thoughts about the kinds of messaging and emails that I should put in to get people to be willing to have a conversation with me?
Yeah, I got a couple of them actually. I think, one thing you can do is there's something that behavioral scientists refer to as the endowment effect. And that is that we place greater value on something that we perceive as ours. So if we think of it as ours, we value it more. So I got this email once from a company that said, you've got a $15 credit in your account that expires by midnight tomorrow. So why not buy, it was for a wine company. So why not buy your wine? Why not buy a bottle of wine? And I found that it was so much more effective than if they had said, "Hey, we're having a sale that expires at midnight tomorrow. We're willing to take $15 off a bottle of wine." It's a subtle but very important difference. Because what they said was, "You've got $15 of credit in your account, but it's going to expire tomorrow." Versus, "Hey, we're having a sale, but the sale is over tomorrow." If they're having a sale, the money is theirs. They're willing to take $15 off, but it's their money. If the $15 credit is in my account, it's mine, and I'm going to lose my $15 unless I put it towards a bottle of wine. So it's a subtle but meaningful difference. So one thing we can do is, if we've identified some of these ripening bananas, right? Maybe we send them an email or a direct mail piece that has a coupon that's good for, maybe it's a free month's rent. Maybe it's for a television for the room. Maybe it's for, whatever seems to make sense. But now they've got it in their hands and it's tangible. They've got the email or they've got the printed coupon and it's theirs. And if they don't use it, they're losing it. So that's a way to trigger the endowment effect, by actually telling people this is yours. Not saying, "Hey, we're running this, and if you do this, then you'll get this." It's more like, you now have this. All you have to do is come in and use it. All you have to do is come in and apply it and redeem it. So that's I think one thing that we can do. The other thing that we should look into is, I know probably a lot of your listeners are familiar with the idea of social proof, right? When people aren't sure of what to do, they look around and they follow the lead of others. And so a great way to demonstrate social proof is to use testimonials, right? I'm sure a lot of your listeners use testimonials on their websites or in their other marketing materials. But here's the thing about testimonials. When people are reading them, it's usually because they're on the fence. They haven't made the decision yet. There's something holding them back. There's something that they need to know. Is it as good as they say it is? Are people really happy there? Is it worth the money? Who knows what the questions are. But if you can find a testimonial that starts at that place, that point of skepticism, it's much better, right? A lot of times we think the testimonial that says, "I love, Shady Oaks. It's the best place ever." We're like, "Oh my gosh, we're Shady Oaks. We're going to use that, that testimonial because this person says they love it." But what you want is someone who says, "I thought that Shady Oaks would be, the same thing as the Green Elms and the wild, the wild birch resort or the wild birch community. I thought they were all going to be the same." But then I visited them and I had the opportunity to do a stay in each. And far and away, Shady Oaks is the place to go. And now the person who's reading it is thinking, that's exactly how I felt. I thought that all three places were pretty much going to be the same. What could possibly be different between them? But this person went and tried them all, and I'm going to benefit from his experience because he tried them all and he likes this one. So anytime we can run testimonials that start with that little bit of skepticism, I wondered if it was going to be as good as the salesperson told me it would be. I wondered if this was going to be something that I could afford. I wondered if my mom would really be happy there. Whatever it is, because these are the kinds of things that hold people back. And when you can find a testimonial that starts there and ends up in that positive spot, that's going to do a lot more for you than just a bunch of testimonials saying, great place, love it.
Hey, Philip, how are you? So Nancy, this is brilliant. I'm as you're talking, I've got all this stuff churning through my head. Some of it about my own business at Foresight. So like I should go out and say to all these people I'm talking to about being sponsors, hey, you've already got $500 credit in your account if you use it by, and to accelerate it. But one of the things I'm really this idea for senior living of being able to say to take to people those question mark moments and saying, I had the same question. I was afraid I couldn't afford it. I didn't think I would have enough value. It was so confusing, and I found this one person who was able to walk me through and figure out the perfect solution. Would be amazing.
Yeah, I think when people see exactly what they're wondering about or what they're worried about, they just feel validated, and then they feel relieved. It's like, I was so afraid my mother wouldn't like it here, but she loves it. And it's like, oh my God, I've been so afraid my mother wouldn't like it, so I haven't done anything. And it's like, maybe I should. It just gives you that permission. And and I think another thing that we can do as marketers is we can talk about the reason why, because behavioral scientists have found that people are more likely to do what we ask them to do when we give them a reason why. And a great way to tee up the reason why is to use the word because. As a matter of fact, there's a researcher named Ellen Langer. She came out of Harvard University, and she identified the word because as an automatic compliance trigger. When we see or hear that word because, we just start to agree. It puts us in a positive mind frame before we've even processed what comes next. So before we've even processed the words after the word because, we're just already assuming it's a good, legitimate reason, and we're, agreeable. So, if you're going to say to people, hey, I've got this $500 credit in your account, but it expires, at a certain time, you can tell them, hey, look, I put this $500 credit in your account because we've talked before, because you've indicated your interest, just having that like reason why, or, I've got it in the account, but it expires on such and such a date. So you should use it now because you may forget if you wait, right? Like that, whatever that, because you may wait, because whatever comes after, because people are already starting to nod yes. So it's like we put $500 in your account since you've talked to us before. However, it's going to expire on such and such a date. So why not use it now? Because whatever comes after the because almost doesn't make a difference. They're already like, yeah, I should use it now, and the reason is because we don't want you to forget, right? Not because, it's a simple reason, right? It's not some earth shattering reason. It's just, well, because we don't want you to forget. But it can really make a difference in terms of how people respond. So, so I think, the idea of the endowment effect, social proof, but with a little bit of skepticism up front, providing the reason why. The other thing that I think would be helpful as we're trying to fill up the remaining 40% is to use something known as labeling. And what behavioral scientists have found is when you label somebody as part of a group, they start to behave as if they're part of that group, even if they hadn't previously thought of themselves that way. They ran a study in Chicago with voters, and they interviewed people, and then they randomly, arbitrarily, having nothing to do with the interviews, put people into one of two groups. And they went to one group and they said, you guys are the more politically active. It had nothing to do with anything. It was completely random. And then they watched to see what would happen a few days later when there was an election in Chicago. And it turned out that 15% more of the people who were told they were more politically active actually showed up at the polls to vote, simply because they were told, well, you're politically active. I mean, what would a politically active person do? They would vote. So if we could use labels that kind of lead to the desired behavior, telling people, you're a caring daughter, you're a responsible adult. Things like that, not that they maybe don't think of themselves that way, but it just kind of, it's how they want to think of themselves, and it matches the action you're asking them to do, because right now they're at a crossroads. They're maybe putting off the decision. They're delaying it. They're not sure they should do it. And it's like, as a caring daughter, you know this is the best thing for your mom.
Oh
Or
man, this is so good. So I'm sort of thinking about it. So I'm having a conversation with a daughter, since that's typically what it was. And I go, as I interact with families, I sort of see two kinds of family members. There's one that's really focused on money, and that's all they really care about. And then I've got then I see this other group where all they really care about is what's best for their mom or their dad. And, after talking to you, I am convinced that you're the kind of person who really cares. Does that work?
absolutely. I mean, from we just had this conversation. From what I'm hearing, you're somebody who really wants what's best for your mom. You're somebody who's putting your mother's needs, as the top priority. Those are the kind of people actually that are the happiest here at our community, or those are the kind of people that frequently choose our community. Let me tell you why. It's because, we have, a program specifically for, active older adults. We have a program specifically for, our memory care residents that was designed by, or designed with input from doctor, whatever it is. But, yes, kind of saying, based on what you've told me, you are someone who, you're a caring, daughter. You're a daughter who's, putting your mom first. Absolutely. And it just, it's like, all right, that's who I am. And people like me choose this community. So therefore, this is the community that I should choose, And then you mentioned another point, and that is there's another group of people who is, understandably concerned with cost. I mean, sometimes you want the best, but you want the best that you can afford, which isn't necessarily going to be the best someone else can afford, right? But
Right.
but when we talk about prices and fees, there are some interesting ways to make them, a little less shocking. And one thing is to use something known as anchoring, because when you're making a purchase like this, maybe you haven't done it before. It might be the first time you're doing it. You don't really know a lot about it. Like I said earlier, a gallon of milk, a gallon of gas, we kind of know what that should cost. But do people really know what it should cost to join a
Yeah.
community? Not necessarily, right? So, you start to have this conversation, and you're talking about, all the things that, a resident gets when they join a community, and da, 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 da. And then before you reveal the price, what you might want to do is you might want to take advantage of something known as anchoring. And anchoring is this idea that the first number we encounter becomes the reference point against which we evaluate everything else. And so what we might want to do is we describe everything and say, for a situation like this, you might think it would be, the cost would be X. And we put a large number up there, larger than what it's going to be. You'll be pleased to know that here at Shady Oaks, right, whatever, here at our
Yeah.
community, it's Y. So what we do is we want to just throw a number out there that's higher than what our number is going to be, so that when they hear our number, by comparison, it seems like a good deal. So we set that higher anchor. Now, there are a number of ways to do it. We could do exactly what I just said. Based on everything I've told you, you might expect to pay this.
Yeah.
You might expect the price would be this. Or I mean, maybe you do want to benchmark against a competitor that charges more. That's, you certainly can if you have that information. Hey, the guys down the street, they're but if you don't want to get into that game, or you don't have the data to play that game, just saying you might expect to pay X, but it's only Y, can make a big difference. Just making that price seem a little bit more, palatable, a little bit more affordable. It's funny the way people respond when you start with a higher anchor, because they don't know what they're dealing with until they get that number.
Well, so many, we're essentially past time here, but so many things that I want to do. Actually, Jada, can you pop up that comment that just came in? I'll put mine off for a second, because I really love this. I remember using the term sandwich generation with a daughter looking for memory care and for her dad at the same time she was being a mom to kids. And she made this comment, "You mean I'm not alone in this?" I think that's a big challenge that people have. So thoughts on that?
Sure. We were talking earlier about empathy and about just making people feel heard or seen, letting them know, look, you're probably going through this. This probably feels really hard. You may be wondering, is this the right time? You may be wondering, how am I going to ever make this decision? You may be wondering if it ever gets any better. These kinds of statements are very validating because people do feel, I've never been through this before. I feel like I'm the only one. I'm the only one who's having these horrible thoughts. I'm the only one who's, thinking I'm going to turn my parents out of their own home. But just validating people and letting them know with emotion and genuine caring, you're not alone. We understand, we understand other people feel the same way. And let me help you. That's what we do here. Just like we've helped a lot of other people in your same situation come to the right decision, come to the right conclusion.
Yeah. So one more, I'm going to come back now. I want to come back to anchoring for one second. I'm going to go one more question, and then I'm going to see if there's anything I missed that you should want to say that I didn't ask you about. So on anchoring, what if I'm the highest price community in the marketplace? Do I still use anchoring and say, well, you might think it costs $25,000 a month, but it only costs $18,000 a month?
Yeah, honestly, that's a perfect example. I mean, if you have the data and it turns out that you're the most expensive or one of the most expensive, what you do is you just plant that artificial one. You describe all the great stuff, all the great care, all the amenities, all the services, everything that that a resident would get in the community. And once you paint that picture, then you toss out a higher anchor and say, I wouldn't be surprised if you think it would cost X, but actually it only cost Y.
I love that. I love that. So what is there anything else I should have asked you that I didn't? I got to ask, what did I miss?
So, this was a great conversation. We covered a lot. That the truth is, I've been enjoying talking to you. We could probably talk all weekend, but
We could.
we definitely could. But no, I think to just kind of summarize, I think the thing that we have to remember is, these decisions are not as cut and dry, as well thought out and well considered and cost benefit analysis as we think. There are a lot of other factors at play. There's a lot of emotion. There are things that we would be surprised make a difference, and yet science has proven that they do. And so if we want to get that 60% occupancy up to 100%, these are the kinds of tactics that we need to start to fold into our marketing messages and into our sales conversations, because they work. Humans are hardwired to just use these decision defaults. And as marketers, we should use what science has proven about human behavior in order to influence it, in order to help people come to the decisions they're trying to get to.
Yeah. And the one thing I do want to say about this is that this isn't about manipulating people into doing things that aren't good for them or aren't what they want to do. It's just about helping people make these really, really difficult questions. So I'm a huge fan of this book, Using Behavioral Science and Marketing, available on Amazon. It is a fascinating read. It's a little deep, I'm going to tell you that. But it's the kind of thing that can really transform your organization. So if you're struggling with occupancy, if you're struggling with your messaging, feels a little bit stale, this will really help you figure out how to get unstuck. Nancy, thank you very much. This was amazing. I wish we had more time. Hang on for just a minute after we are done, and we will see you back next week for another great show.